All right, welcome to everybody. This is our first official Instagram live from Floracopeia and David Crow, and thank you for being so patient over the last week while we got our tech problems worked out. So today I'm going to be talking about roses, and there's a lot to talk about. And before I start on some of the details, I'd just like to welcome you to my little meditation room. This is where I teach from. This is where I do my meditation practice, and this is a good place to talk about roses. It's a good place to talk about all of the different ways that we can use roses for therapeutic benefits. We talk about some Ayurveda and some Chinese medicine and how we can understand rose oil and rose products. And I will mention some of the products that we have happening over at Floracopeia, of course. So it's going to be a little bit of mysticism and a little bit of marketing all woven together. So let's get started. And I wanted to tell you about a particular practice that is done in Japanese incense making, in the Japanese incense tradition. And this is how I would like to start things off here. How to approach roses. How to approach flowers in general. And actually that's how we can approach plants. And understanding how to relate to plants is very important because our survival depends on them. So we're going to use rose as an example of a lot of different things in this short presentation. And I have a bottle of rose oil, but I invite you to bring out any rose products that you may have, and that could be a rose hydrosol that you could mist yourself with while we're sharing this experience. It could be rose oil if you have it. It could be a number of different forms of roses. It could even be that free bottle of rose perfume we're offering over at Floracopeia. So check that out. And I wanted to start this off by doing this little practice, which in Japanese incense making, there's a ceremony, specifically using the sacred woods, but we're going to do this with roses, which are also sacred. And it's called listening to the fragrance. And I like this because it means that we're paying attention to something very closely. And we're not just smelling it, but we're also trying to listen to it at the same time. And that means we're being receptive. And when we are receptive to a plant, then it will reveal a lot of things to us. It will teach us things. And then if we know something through our studies, maybe know something intellectually or academically from classical Asian medicine or from chemistry or something like that, then that information is always also available. But to start off, I would like to encourage all of us to listen to roses and see what they might have to say. So I'm going to demonstrate how we do this in the aromatherapy and the perfumery world. We just put a little drop of rose oil on a perfume strip, but you can put it on the fingertip, you can anoint yourself with it. And then we pause and we take a deep breath and we inhale. And we pay very close attention to the body sensations, and we listen to what the roses are telling us. So I'm just going to start here. I had a script, but I threw it out as I frequently do. That's just how I am. And I am going to tell you what I hear the roses saying. And some of this is my own personal background. Some of it is memory, because of course fragrance elicits memory, especially emotional memories. But it's also based on Ayurveda because what is on the perfume strip can be described so very nicely in terms of the elements. But I'm also going to tell you some of the things that come to mind as I smell this rose oil about its origin, because this oil came from somewhere and I'm familiar with where it came from. And so that means I have a personal connection to the land and the soil of where this rose oil came from. This rose oil came specifically from Bulgaria. So when we smell this rose oil, we are actually connecting ourselves to the soil of Bulgaria and to the seasons and to the rain and to the moonlight. And this is one of the things that we can hear when we pay attention to the plants is we can hear what is inside them. We can hear the environment that they grew in. We can smell it, we can feel it, and that's what's actually giving us the therapeutic benefits. So that's kind of a broader introduction. But now I'm going to pause and I'm going to listen. And this is the difficult part because, of course, I like to talk. So I'm going to listen, and I'm just going to tell you a few things that come to mind. And so first, I smell the sweetness of the roses. And so what is the sweetness? And what's the link between sweetness and roses and flowers in general? And what does this have to do therapeutically? Why is the sweetness of roses important? Why is the sweetness of roses even therapeutic? Because as we look into this, we smell this, and this sweetness is actually the medicine. Okay? Perceiving the sweetness of all the flower oils, but especially the rose, which is extremely sweet. It's like honey. That's what I'm experiencing now, as I'm smelling honey. So where did that come from? What does it do? Why is it important? Well, rose, if I feel into this a little bit more and tell you what the rose is telling me, the rose is telling me that this has something to do with the heart, and that sweetness has something to do with the heart. And so rose oil, if we now break it down into some of the therapeutic applications in aromatherapy, what we find is that the sweetness of rose oil helps to support and nourish the heart and the spirit. And the spirit in Chinese medicine is said to abide in the heart. And so therefore we can say that a sweet aroma from a flower that is therapeutic for the heart is actually nourishment for the spirit. All right, so now we can start to see some of the cosmology of classical Asian medicine starting to make some sense here. So now let me just pause and listen again. And if you are with me, you can do this also. Listen to the rose, and what does it tell us? Well, it reminds me that it's very old, actually. That's one of the things. Even though this oil is distilled fresh every year, that the intelligence that made this oil came from plants that have been around for a very long time. And I always find it interesting to remember that when experiencing an essential oil, is that we're not just smelling an essential oil, we're actually smelling botanical history. And if we smell botanical history, well, how far back does that go? I mean, plants are millions of years old. And so roses are a very interesting topic historically. And so as I'm smelling this, I'm remembering that not only is this oil new, but the plants are old. And specifically, roses have been around for 30 million years. All right. So there's an intelligence in this oil that has been produced year after year after year by the roses for a very long time. Now, is that important therapeutically? Does it make any difference, actually, that if we take an herb or we smell an essential oil, that it goes back millions of years? I think it does, and I'll tell you why with roses specifically. Because one of the things that we need spiritually, psychologically, emotionally, and socially is a sense of being connected to nature, and a sense of there being continuity in how life is unfolding. And so it used to be that life was a bit more timeless. People lived in places and they didn't go anywhere. They lived there generation after generation, and they knew where they came from, and they knew that life was going to be the same. And now that's all gone. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. And so there's a deep uncertainty that is in our psyche now, that is being affected every time we watch the news, every time we receive new information about things that are happening in the environment, whether it's the fires in the west or the floods in the east or whatever. There's great uncertainty. And this is something that if we connect with the plants on any level, whether it is giving thanks for the food that we have on our plate and recognizing that it is grounding us to this ancient history, or whether we are consuming an herbal medicine through a tea, or whether we are smelling an essential oil, if we simply stop and remember that these simple plants have been around for a lot longer than we have. And every year they give us a flower. Over and over and over. For millions of years they've been doing that. Then that's part of what's healing us, you see. It's an opportunity to connect to something old that's been here for a long time. And most likely, a lot of plants, and probably roses, will be here after we are gone, okay? So what we're talking about then is recognizing the power of ancient intelligence and recognizing the continuity of this ancient intelligence through a very long period of time. And that is something that I believe, I feel is very important about herbal medicine. When we use herbal medicine, when we use aromatherapy, we're actually using the healing power of something old, and it is connecting us to a continuity of life in the ecosphere. So let's see what else comes out here. All right, so I listen to the rose, feel its effects, and perceive its sweetness. And like I was saying before, the sweetness is part of the therapeutic benefit. And so what does that sweetness do, actually? So what I'm noticing as I am smelling this rose oil is I'm actually feeling a kind of settling of my nervous system. And this is something that's recognized by science, because science is confirming what people have known for thousands of years about the biochemical activities of herbal medicine. And so roses have always had a very, very special place in the pharmacopeias of herbal traditions, everywhere, all over the world, actually. And one of the things that is consistently said therapeutically about rose oil is, again, it goes back to nourishment of the heart, calming of the spirit. And so what does that mean? It means it's antidepressant, it's anti-anxiety. And those are basically the two ends of the spectrum of all of the different kinds of emotional and mental suffering that we have. And so if we have something that nourishes our spirit and lifts us up, that's antidepressant. And if we have something that relaxes the spirit, calms the heart, that's anxiolytic. And that means that it can help us find balance. And the balanced state of mind is described so beautifully in Ayurvedic medicine as the sattvic state of mind. That means that it helps us to remember our mental clarity. It helps us to bring us back to a state of mental presence, focus, clarity that is free of emotional turbulence and distraction and intensity. And so this is what rose oil can help us do. And why? Well, we don't know exactly all the mechanisms. We know that the olfactory system transmits the molecules of the roses into our brain. And so when we are breathing the rose oil, we're actually ingesting the ethereal aromatic compounds into our brain, which is metabolized into our consciousness. And so that is then going to affect our mood through the limbic system specifically, but it also works on the endocrine system indirectly. And this is where we find that roses have a special affinity for the female hormonal system. And so rose oil is the basis of so many different aromatherapy formulations. And one of the things that we find that's really interesting is that rose oil is combined, it combines well with almost anything, really, but it combines really well with other flowers. And if you combine rose oil with other flower oils, such as lavender, or geranium is a really good one, or neroli, the orange blossom, or any of these kind of flower oils, any simple combination that you like, and it's completely your personal preference how you do this, all right? 1 drop rose, 2 drops lavender. I mean, it's completely up to you how you want to experiment with it. There's no strict formulas. And actually the way to think about it is just have fun with the flowers, you know, experiment. And then breathe it. That's the most important thing, is breathe the blend. And there are so many blends that are available. We've got a bunch of blends over at Floracopeia that have rose in it and a lot of different rose products. But the most important thing is to breathe it and to get it into our system. And then on top of that, the most important thing is to breathe it mindfully. Because if we're talking about using aromatherapy for lifting up our mood, for antidepressant purposes, for relaxing our nervous system, it's very important that we work with the plants. A lot of people think, well, what's the herb that's going to get rid of my insomnia? What's the herb that's going to get rid of my anxiety? Or what's the antidepressant herb? And it doesn't really work that way. You see, because when it comes to our mind, when it comes to our emotional states, our mind is more powerful than most of the plants. Okay. Now, there's a few plants that will do something to us. We could take a lot of cannabis and knock ourselves out, but that's not going to work very well on a daily basis in terms of our overall health. It's crisis management, but rose oil is not crisis management. So what we have to do is work with the plants and understand that they're not going to do things to us. They're going to help us do things for ourselves, all right? So therefore, if we're going to use rose oil, and it could be just as simple as listening to it, we should do it mindfully, and we should do it repeatedly, and we should use it as an opportunity to train ourselves to get control of our own stress and our own anxiety and our own depression. And so I will show you how I like to do this. I've already showed you the perfume strip technique, but now I'll just show you the anointing technique. And you can do this with any kind of rose product. Something that comes to mind, we have the rose attar, which is rose and sandalwood. That's a beautiful combination. We have a couple other rose products that are there. And I'll mention again, we have a rose product that we are giving away with a purchase. And this rose perfume product is organic jojoba with the CO2 extracted white rose from Bulgaria. So that's what I'm going to tell you. But now I'm going to tell you about anointing. And you take 1 drop of any of these rose products. All right, just take 1 drop, and before you inhale it, make sure that you are sitting calmly and relaxing yourself. And then slowly inhale it and pay attention. And use it to deliberately create a physiological state in your body. So everybody knows how they can deepen relaxation. Deepen the relaxation consciously. Inhale the fragrance. Notice how it helps deepen it even more. In other words, let the roses support your own process of going deeper. Don't expect them to fix anything. Just expect them to be there to make your own relaxation and meditation practice more sattvic, all right? Faster. That's how we can use a lot of these plants. It's not that they're going to, give us illumination. It's they're going to help us to achieve a sattvic state of mind faster. And here's a very important point with this, and that is that fragrance can train our memory. Fragrance can train our nervous system to remember physiological states because fragrance is directly linked to memory. Therefore, if I sit down and I go into a relaxed state, and then I breathe rose oil, and I go into an even more relaxed state, then what happens is every time I smell rose, my nervous system is going to be reminded of that relaxed state. And this is the difference between using herbs just kind of as an allopathic treatment. You just, gulp down your turmeric capsule. You just, take something on the run versus stopping and interacting with it and paying attention to it. Now, this does a very interesting thing. When we pay attention and listen to the plants and we use them in this particular way, we are actually giving energy to the plants. They're not just giving energy to us, we're giving energy to them also. And that energy is the energy of our attention. That energy is the prana of mindfulness. And a very interesting thing happens if I pay more attention to that rose oil I'm paying more attention to nature. I'm paying more attention to the roses and their intelligence and their ancient history and everything that's in them. And in turn, they're paying more attention to me because I'm more present with them. And what happens is that their blessings come to us even more magnified than if I were just to put it on as a perfume and that's it. All right? So what I am proposing that we do with our plant medicine, starting with this little talk about roses, is let's reconnect to nature right now through a very simple process of just paying attention to whatever we are using. You put an essential oil in the diffuser, great, but pay attention to what's happening. Pay attention to how it makes you feel. You're using the free rose perfume roll-on, fine, just use it, but use it very mindfully and carefully, all right? So let's do a couple more things here before we switch over and check and see if any questions are coming in. And for those of you who are on, go ahead and submit them if you would like. And I have so many more things I could say. There's a couple important things that I want to mention, though, about where this comes from and what goes into this before I pause. So one of the things that's really important when we are smelling anything in the aromatherapy department, or when we are making teas and taking herbs, anything that we are doing, okay, is to recognize that something produced this. And that something has been around for a very long time. When we're talking about plant medicine, we're talking about ancient intelligence, as I've said. All the plant medicines have that. But it isn't just the ancient pranic, immunological, evolutionary life force in the plant that we are receiving. It's that we are receiving different versions of it from every plant. And furthermore, we're receiving different versions of it from the ecosystems where even the same species come from. So roses from Bulgaria are different than roses from Morocco. Even the same species, even the Rosa damascena is different from Bulgaria than it is from Morocco. And the reason for that is what we could say is the ecophysiology. And this is where we can do a beautiful study, a little exercise here in the integration between modern science and the cosmology of classical Asian medical systems, such as Ayurveda and Chinese medicine. So what we know about roses specifically is that roses love moonlight. And roses produce the most essential oil that is the sweetest, the highest quality on the morning of the full moon, when the full moon is setting and the sun is rising. And we also know, and this is distiller's knowledge, that roses produce the highest amount of rose oil between 2 in the morning and about 10 a.m. And that's why plucking them early in the morning is very important, because after that the rose oil decreases in the flowers. So this biorhythm that is both daily, the diurnal cycle linked to the sun and to the moon, are actually very important in rose oil as a medicine, because it links to the effect of sun and moon on our nervous system, which is the effect of sympathetic and parasympathetic. Now, roses produce the maximum amount of oil at dawn. When darkness is transforming into light, which is the time that Ayurveda says is called Brahma Muhurta, God's favorite time, when darkness is transforming into light. Now this has some symbolic meaning, but it also has some biochemical meaning, because that means that the rose oil is actually the distilled essence of God's favorite time, biorhythmically. And then if we look at the relationship with the moon, what we see is that rose oil has qualities that are described in Ayurvedic medicine as related to soma, related to moonlight. And what are the therapeutic qualities of moonlight? It's sweetness, and the effect of sweetness on the heart, and nourishing for the spirit. So soma then is the moonlight that the roses capture, which increases as the moon gets full. And then it gives us this oil during God's favorite time, which is a transition of darkness into light. And if we put this all together, we look at it sort of through the lens of how a classical alchemist would look at this, we can see that there's a mystical dimension to rose oil. And I'm only using this as one example because all plants have these stories, and understanding these stories gives us a very deep appreciation of plant medicine. So what we can say then is that rose oil is actually the distilled sweetness of the moonlight that's captured in the flowers at God's favorite time that has an effect on lifting our spirit out of darkness. So it nourishes the spirit and the heart with sweetness, and it lifts us out of darkness. Now here I would like to link this back to some urgent issues, because really, whenever I give a talk about plant medicine, I always think about, well, what does this mean for us? Why is this important? And plant medicine is actually becoming more and more urgently necessary for everybody because stress levels are going up. But it's not just the benefits we get from the plant medicines that can help us biologically, help us spiritually and neurologically and emotionally and mentally that we need. It's also that these plants play a role in nature that we need also. So how can we mitigate global warming? This is a question that's obviously on everybody's mind. And what I can say is organic agriculture is a big answer to that. And so then if we tie those two things together, we see, all right, here's organic agriculture. It's happening over here in Bulgaria and Morocco where our oils come from. And that is one of the things that makes them different. Organic rose oil is very difficult to come by. There's a lot of rose oil that's out there that's been sprayed, but organic is very difficult to produce, all right? And so we have the agricultural side that is supportive. Is that going to turn things around? Well, it's mitigating it because it's creating a beautiful environment. And if we could just create a beautiful environment everywhere, then there's hope, all right? So we have the agricultural side, which is healing. And then we have a product, a flower. And the flower is healing. And what is the flower healing for, very specifically? Well, I think that botanical medicine now is going to be playing more and more of a role for all kinds of things coming from the stress of the environment breaking down. And so as we go in future talks, I will be mentioning things for protecting our lungs from the smoke and from the mold, and protecting our mind from the stress, and protecting our heart from the disturbances and the tension and all of these kind of things. And so what we see then is that the flowers are trying to help us. Okay, they're trying to basically protect the environment, and we need to support them in that opportunity, because that's what they've been doing all along. They created the biosphere for us. All the plants create and maintain the biosphere. We need to support them doing that. And they, in turn, are giving us medicines that can help us cope with what's happening. So I look at rose oil as just one simple example that if we look at the benefits of any plant medicine, what we see now is that there are global benefits for the environment and there's individual benefits. And more of those benefits are increasingly urgent for all of humanity, for what's happening. All right. Well, I could start a new cycle of meditation and listening to the roses again, but let me just pause here. And I think maybe one thing that could be helpful is giving you a little bit more information about how you can use this. Give you a little therapeutic information to take away. Now, if you have rose oil, it's a great blessing. And you don't need very much of it. It's a great blessing because it means you have some prosperity. It is a product for those who have prosperity. And the reason for that is because it takes so many roses to get so little oil. Not all essential oils are like that. And you can substitute with some of the same benefits the rose geranium. It is a geranium oil, but it has a lot of the same kind of compounds in it, and it does have a rose fragrance. And you can get various products that have pure rose oil in them in lower concentration. That's what our perfume is, our jojoba-based perfume. And you can come in contact through the olfactory system with the pure rose oil at a much lower cost. So it's not necessary to have the dram bottle of extremely rare organic rose oil. There's lots of other forms. And probably the most cost effective is the rose water. But you also have to be careful, get the organic, okay? So hydrosol, the rose hydrosol, mist yourself with it. And anything that has pure rose oil in it will convey those blessings. Now, a few combinations, very simple. You can make an attar. And I would suggest maybe 3 or 4 drops of rose oil with about 5 or 6 drops of sandalwood. That will give a lot of rose fragrance, okay? But it's totally up to you. And what's important is just play with it. You have a little sandalwood, you have a little rose, put it on a perfume strip, or just put a drop of sandalwood on a fingertip, put a drop of rose on another fingertip, smell it, anoint yourself with it on both sides, and you're going to basically have a rose attar that you're wearing as a meditative type of perfume. So again, as I mentioned, all the flower oils work really well, and they work specifically for the female hormonal system, and they're very good for PMS, and they're very good for any of the discomforts of menopause. So flowers have this kind of physiological, biological, and spiritual link to the female hormonal system. And why is that? Well, flowers are a reproductive system, and they are very feminine, okay? And so there's a biological link, actually, between flowers and the biorhythm of when they produce the oils, and the female hormonal biorhythm as well. And so here is something to think about when you are using aromatherapy with flowers, or you are drinking flower tea, because you can do this by drinking rose petal tea, and you can drink lavender tea and chamomile tea. All of these flower teas are also going to have a nice effect on the biorhythms of the female system. Why is it? Because flowers have a biorhythm, you see. And so roses, I told you about that biorhythm that comes at God's favorite time. Well, that's basically when the flower is producing its pulsations of aromatic molecules. Now, what happens if we distill a biorhythm? That's what happens with the rose oil. You distill roses, you're distilling a biorhythm, okay? And we're not only getting the distilled essence of the moonlight and that time of dawn that's God's favorite, but we are also getting the pulsation of the production of those aromatic molecules. And that's what's unique about flower oils, and rose especially, related to the female hormonal system, is that when we use it, whether it's a couple drops on a bath, or you wear it as a perfume, or you mix it with a couple other flower oils, or put it in a base like jojoba, or use it with sandalwood as an attar, when we use that, what happens is that we are actually connecting to the biospheric biorhythms of the sun and the moon. And the flower oils have an effect on those biorhythms. And how do we know that? Because the disturbances of the spirit, the Shen, that abides in the heart, according to traditional Chinese medicine, that is our mental clarity, that is our sattvic mind, that is the mind that is free of emotional disturbances and comfortable, is directly related to being in the flow of the biorhythms. And so when the biorhythms go off and you get insomnia because you are having difficulty sleeping or waking up because you have hot flashes during menopausal time, then that disturbs the spirit. And likewise, if the spirit is disturbed from stress, it heats the body up and it increases the likelihood of there being hot flashes. And so what are we talking about? The biorhythm of sun and moon inside the body are out of balance. And so we bring the plants in that are rich in these distilled biorhythms. And what we know, this is a poetic way of describing it, but what we know clinically is that it helps the symptoms. And if it helps the symptoms, then we know that it must be addressing the underlying biorhythmic disorder. Because if you use flower oils and you can sleep better, then that means it's addressing your biorhythmic imbalance. All right, let me see if there's any questions coming in, any comments that are happening here. So a question came in, good. Climate change is rose good for immunity or from protecting against smoke from fires? Well, all right, so here's how I would look at this. There are other things that are more directly beneficial for protecting ourselves from smoke from fires. And I will address this in a coming event. All right, I'll just remind you that I'm going to be here every Friday, 12 o'clock Pacific time. And I will talk like this, but every time I will have a different plant medicine. And I will also mention, just a little preview, we have something very special next week. It is a mystery oil, and it is a world first. So hope you can join me next week. But in terms of this question, rose oil is not necessarily the best thing for protecting ourselves from smoke. And I'll tell you why. It's really expensive. Now, can you use it for the general dryness, toxic atmosphere? I would suggest hydrosol, all right? Or a couple drops on the bath would be nice. You want to make this last. You want to stretch it out. So general dryness from heat and the environmental toxicity, mist yourself frequently with rose hydrosol. That's a nice way to do it. But there's other things that are more effective, and some of those things are the tree oils. Flower oils are very, very good in a diffuser in the home, absolutely. But you don't want to use rose oil in a diffuser. It's just too expensive. But think of all the other oils. You could use a rose geranium and mix it with lavender. Rose geranium is a little stronger in fragrance intensity, so you could use like 2 parts rose geranium, 4 parts lavender. That's a nice simple combination in a diffuser. And that will give several levels of protection against smoke. It's immunologically stimulating for the respiratory system, but it's also purifying for the atmosphere. But here is the main thing that we can think about rose oil for protection from climate change. And that is not necessarily protection from smoke. It is good for the immune system, by the way, but it works indirectly, all right? It works because it balances our mind, all right? And if we are in a relaxed state of mind, a sattvic state of mind, then that's good for our immune system, all right? That's a very simple way to think about it. But, you know, I was thinking about what is the relevance, actually, for rose oil for the issues that we're facing now with climate change. And I don't know if this will resonate with some of you. I think it probably will resonate with everybody. But what I have come to think about a lot, and I don't know if this term is being used or not, but I think the term that would describe it, that's kind of been floating around in my mind, is Ecodespair, okay? It's like we live with a kind of eco-despair in California now, okay? Especially people in the mountains, and especially people who have lost their homes. And these fires that have been happening have been getting so bad, so fast, that I think actually what's going to happen is that people in the western states are actually going to start to become afraid of summer. You know, it's like people are going to be afraid of springtime because it means that the fires are coming again. You know, and that, if we think about it, well, that's a source of sadness, isn't it? Well, that kind of sadness, that's where we need botanical protection to lift our spirit. All right. Another thing that I was thinking about that, I've just been noticing that, you know, there's less and less songbirds around, and butterflies and things like that. I mean, how sad is that? So these are sources of pain, really. sources of pain to the heart, because it's loss, you see. It's loss of our connection to nature, and how important is that to us, and how beautiful and nourishing is nature, and how much do we need to feel connected to some kind of hope about this, you know? So that's where I would say rose can protect us from climate change. It's not that it's going to turn around the climate emergency, but all the plants, the more we appreciate them and the more we use them, and the more that they carry that hope into our deeper consciousness, into our heart and spirit, then the more they can help us immunologically also. All right, that's a big subject. I think that you probably can appreciate that all these things that I've talked about in this short period of time, these are things I could talk about for, years and years. If we're only meeting once a week, maybe we should meet more. So, is rose balancing for all the doshas? Good question. All right, now, rose oil and rose as a tea are somewhat different. Now, there's a couple different ways we could look at this, but I'll just address the rose oil, the fragrance of the rose oil. And what we can say then is that rose is mostly cooling. Most of the flower oils are cooling, and that means that they reduce the pitta. Okay, so balancing to the pitta, yes. Now, what do they do to the vata? Well, the vata is the overstimulated nervous system, and rose will calm down the overstimulated nervous system. Okay, and therefore, if we are calming down the overstimulated nervous system, that means we're addressing chronic adrenal fatigue issues. Calming down the nervous system, balancing vata. Cooling, balancing, reducing pitta. That's why we see that rose is so good on the skin for inflammatory skin conditions. You see, it goes into so many skincare products because it is inflammatory by nature for the skin. Right. So reduces pitta, calms down the vata. Now, what does it do for the kapha? All right. Well, we could say that because it's very calming and relaxing, that it might increase the kapha. It's unctuous. The oil is unctuous, and it's rich in soma, the moonlight, the sweetness. And so we could say theoretically that it would increase kapha. But here's the thing about aromatherapy, is that you simply cannot, really damage your doshas by breathing essential oils. Well, you can, but you have to really overdo it. And of course, people do overdo it. People think that more is better with all kinds of things. So if you put a spice oil like cinnamon on your skin, you can burn yourself, That's badly aggravating the pitta. But smelling the rose oil, it will nourish the kapha. It will nourish the shen, the spirit, because it's soma, it's sweetness. Now, what it will do, as I mentioned, is that it will help to bring about a sattvic state of mind, where the mind is clear, it's connected to the heart, the qualities of the heart are open, expressing themselves through our eyes and through our speech and through our gestures, that we are basically coming from our spiritual center. That's what rose can help us do if we use it reverently, and we use it with meditation and with that intention especially. And especially if we use it when we are out of that state of mind. So when we get out of that state of mind, recognize that we are out, take a moment, sit down, calm ourselves, and retrain ourselves to move back into the sattvic state of mind with the rose oil as a mnemonic aromatic device to help us get there faster. That sattvic state of mind is what balances the doshas more than anything. All right, hope that was helpful. Best way to store rose oil, what's its expected lifespan? Good question. So the best way is to keep it in an amber bottle, and that's what we've got. And the perfume and other products also come in the Myron glass, so it's dark, it's protected from the sunlight. Keep it out of the sunlight anyway. Don't let it get hot, okay? And that's all you need to do. And it will last for years and years and years. Rose oil has longevity, Okay, it's quite good that way. All right. So I think that covers a few things that have come in, and I think it's a good place to stop. And so I want to mention again that we have several products over at Floracopeia, and we do have a promotional special that's going on, that you will get a bottle of our white rose infused jojoba perfume free with a purchase. And I think it's $100 or something like that. So yeah, okay, it requires an investment when you get into the rose side of herbal medicine. So check out the products over there. And I also want to mention that my consultation site is available for those of you who want to talk in more detail. I am available for medical consultations. And that website is Crow Consultations, just like it sounds, CROW consultations.com. And so if you would like to continue the discussion, you have health concerns, you can contact me there. And I will be here every week, Friday at 12 o'clock Pacific. And next week, I will be telling you about a world first new essential oil. So with that, thank you so much for the nice comments. It looks like everybody enjoyed this. And some people are saying they actually feel relaxed just from talking about rose oil. Good, wonderful. Have a wonderful, safe week. I will see you next week.